Wow.
So should rappers take their music off stream to get it back to where people got to pay real money to get it?
Yep, I would. It costed us so much money to make those albums.
Mm-hmm.
It costs so much to pay a producer. But now, you know what? I think producers may make a beat for $200 now. I'm not lying. But I know back in the gap, you know, a Dr. Dre beat was 250 grand. You know, Timberland beat was 150, $200,000.
Wow.
As the Neptunes and all of them, that shit was high.
Yeah.
So it would be shameful to get a beat from these top-notch producers and then have to put your shit on a stream and wait for it to stream.
Wow. So you got to get in order to get some money, you got to do like 1 billion streams.
If you want some money, yeah.
So like Drake and Kendrick, they doing billions.
They be doing billions of streams, so they getting money.
Yeah, Beyonce, Taylor Swift,
Streams, you know. But it's too much. It's too much red tape, man, in between that, because you don't never know. It's kind of like the record selling too. You don't know how many records you really sold.
Right.
You know what I mean?
When they tell you.
Let's just go by what they tell you. You know. But the streaming, I'm still not hip to how this works.
Right.
And that's why I'm not putting out any new music. I'm not releasing any new music, because it would just be all done in vain. Because those people have come up with something so slick to cut us all the way out the money. You know, the mom and pop saved hip hop. The mom and pop saved our lives. Because if we couldn't do anything else, we can sell 100,000 records and make $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
God forbid you sold 1 million records and made $10 million. You know,
but you used to go back in the day. You look forward to going to the shop and getting the vinyl.
You did, and you read the credits.
Yes.
And you can roll a square on the record. Say yes, yeah. You know, you pop the cassette in. Yeah, like we had jams, man, and they sold. Not just listening to shit, man, and I'm gonna listen to this, and I'm gonna pay him half a penny, but after this, I want to hear something else and pay them half a penny. No, you had to buy that body of work.
Yeah.
Like you can't like a real artist, man, you can't judge their body of work by one song.
All right, so yes, the legend, Scarface, said a lot right there. We have a lot to unpack with that, what he was saying. And I'm going to start off by saying this. What he was saying is actually right. I actually agree with what he's saying, especially with the fact of, you know, the body of work, and especially the amount that production has went down so far as the cost and everything like that. I actually agree with that with him. And I really do feel that you need to listen to a body of work from an artist rather than just listening to one song, because right now we're in a very much of a microwave society, and people do not really want to like do research on these artists or anything anymore. They just listen to a song and it's just, oh, we pass it and we keep going. However, on the streaming side, I kind of have a different point of view a little bit with that, because I came in right when, you know, sales were going out and streaming was coming in. And for what I can tell you is that I pretty much made the same amount of money. The only thing is it takes longer to get your money. That's the one thing with streaming that I noticed with a lot of, I can call them my OGs, from producers to everybody else. We have long conversations about streaming. Shout out to my guy DJ Toomp. You know, me and him would get on the phone for an hour and we just discuss things. And you know, a lot of the guys who are older that was in that time when they made buku amounts of money, and I mean a crazy amount of money up front, a lot of them are not understanding the streaming as much, because of course a lot of us are not really informed on how we really get paid from a stream, what's all the variables and everything. Like, hell, I don't even know all of this stuff right now. You know what I'm saying? So even I can say that I'm kind of miseducated on it, because I don't really know everything in all the variables because with streaming, it comes with so many different variables. But also back in the day when it came to actually buying physical copies, it came with some variables as well, which I kind of discussed that real quick. The one thing that that happened with the actual physical copies when you would go into the storage. Of course, you had your singles, then you had your singles with the remixes. I think they were called like maxi singles. I can't remember what they were called during that time. But you had so many different variables on that. You had, of course, the amount of writers, producers, and stuff like that. Then the other variable was you had to have people to actually pick up the actual physical copy. And once you picked up that physical copy, that was it. There was no more, nothing. So the biggest variable about having that physical copy was if you lost that physical copy, you had a choice. You either went out and bought another copy from the store, or you bought another copy from the bootlegger, which artists were not getting paid from the bootlegging, or you just didn't get it at all. And you just said, okay, well, my CD or my tape is lost. That's it. And it was over with. So you didn't have anything else. So once you made that one-time initial payment, that was pretty much it. And that's the biggest thing for me with, back then to now, because I grew up in the 80s where the cassette tape, was the thing. And then the 90s where the CDs were the thing. And then all the way up into streaming. Okay, so I've been through, three eras of like a way to hear your music pretty much. And what I can say is with streaming, the one thing that I do like about streaming is say for instance, if you just think about a song and you want to hear that song, whether it's on iTunes, whether it's on Spotify, whether it's on YouTube, you can pretty much hear that song somewhere. YouTube Music, completely free. It just comes with ads. You can listen to whatever song that you want to listen to in that database at any time. And then when you do that, it creates a small mechanical royalty. Now, is the royalty what we want it to be? Of course not. It's nowhere near where we want it to be. But, we left it up to artists and everybody else, back in the day, we would probably want to sell our CDs for $40 and $50, but we had to have a standard for that. So the standard at that time was around about CDs were going pretty expensive at that time. So you would have to pay $15 to sometimes $17, $20 for a CD. Okay, so people were making a lot of money back then. So when you're making a lot of money like that back in that time, everything goes up, even with production. Like I was just on Sunny Digital's Live, and I was talking about, back in the early 2000s, it was not uncommon for me to sell a beat straight to somebody on the street for $700, $800, $900, sometimes $1,000. It wasn't uncommon. But as time went on, it got cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So now you got kids selling beats for $200. I don't know if they're leasing them. I don't know if they're giving out the full rights. I don't know, but you have kids selling beats for that much. However, you had people selling beats for that much back in the day as well. So I think that from where he's coming at, I think that he's looking at it from a point of view from somebody who is...
You're not stuck because you're not capable. You're stuck because you won't let go. Successful entrepreneurs aren't superhumans. They just stop doing work that
has their own record deal. They're in the industry and they're a top-notch artist. Because as we know, the people that he did list and that he was saying as producers, they only work with the best of the best, and they only work with people who had the budget to be worked with. So Dr. Dre was not giving out beats to Joe Smo over here and this person over there. Timbaland wasn't doing that as well. They were working with people who have budgets, because if you know about the music game, budgets back then was how a lot of people got paid. The budget is what people were looking for rather than sometimes even actual sales. Because say, for instance, if you're a producer and you're charging a lot of money, You got to work with somebody who has the budget to pay you, or you really got to believe in that artist and say, hey, what we can do is we can do a swap out, or we can do this or do that. And that during that time, a lot of people weren't doing swap outs like that. They were getting to the bread. And so I get what he's saying, but from an independent point of view, a lot of people who were independent back in those days worked with people who did not get paid. The only person back then who sometimes got paid while you were independent back in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s was the engineers, because a lot of people did not have home studios. And even if you did, you had to have a qualified engineer who knew how to work the tape, who knew how to work certain things. So unless you bought something like maybe a 4-track tape recorder or something like that that you can record at your crib or whatever. But other than that, if you wanted a quality sound, you would have to go to a decent studio with decent engineers and get everything recorded. So during that time, and I've talked to a lot of people, they had people who were working with them, and then sometimes they didn't even get money as producers, because a lot of times is those tapes and those CDs were being sold pretty much on the street level. So even if an artist was working with somebody, they might shoot them a couple dollars. Hey man, how much you gonna charge for these beats? Oh man, give me $1,500 for 3. Okay, the producer gets his $1,500 for those 3 beats. The artist goes out, makes songs to the beats. They may do a co-signment thing, because that was a big thing back in the day. You would go to certain stores, you would give them 100 CDs. The place would pay you sometimes $500. They'll pay you $5 for each one of the CDs, and then they would turn around and then upsell the CDs for $10 or $3, and then they'll upsell it for $7 or $8, and then you would do it like that, and then that way you would make your money, and then you would go back and then you would collect your money from the CD sales, and you can actually count. Okay, I sold 50 CDs. I know how much money I need to make, or they'll just pay you up front for the CDs that you gave them, because you might be an artist that they know that may sell. So, that was a thing back then. But the producer at the time wouldn't get nothing. Wouldn't be no royalties, wouldn't be anything, because it was a street level type of a thing. Nowadays, if you're a producer and you sell somebody a beat and they go ahead and upload it online, you can now get paid from that as a producer, because now you can claim that and say, hey, I'm the producer on here. We made an agreement. He's the writer, and I'm the composer. And basically, I can get my money from these streams. And if it streams pretty good, you make pretty decent money, because it all depends on what it's streamed on and, where it's streamed at and a whole bunch of other stuff. Now, what I can say personally for me, of course, I would want the streaming rate to go up. I definitely do. However, when my biggest record came out in 2015, we were making a lot of sales, but then we were making a ton of money on streams, and this was like the wild, wild west. So it's probably a lot of money I left on the board that might be lingering around too. But once I seen the sales started fading and the stream started going up, I didn't really see a difference in the total amount of money that I made. I just seen a difference on how fast I got to the money. So I still think if you're a big artist, you're still going to make money, just like there was a whole bunch of big artists at that time that made a bunch of money, and there was a whole bunch of artists that were signed or artists that wasn't that big that didn't make any money. Because just because you had your stuff on CD and you put it in stores, a lot of that stuff sat on the shelf as well. Just like a lot of people who upload their music that either they don't promote it the right way, or the music's not that good, it would just sit on these sites and nobody will listen to them. So I still think it's the same thing. Right now, the average, what he did say is 1 million streams is about $4,000, which is about right. Okay, take a give 1,000 or 2. Sometimes it could be 6,000, close to 7. Sometimes it could be 3,000 or whatever. But the average is around 4,000 to 5,000 per million streams. Somebody
let me show you how to turn this loop.
You got me paranoid and stuff that I can afford it.
And this loop.
Like Scarface, he puts out some songs and stuff right now. I know for a fact that it would do millions of streams, because people are like, he has like a cult following of fans or whatever. So he would do pretty good streaming wise if he did it independently. I know this for a fact. Like Scarface would do millions, and then plus you got to think of everything else, shows, publishing, stuff like that. And then even at the age he's at right now, like people are like, okay, we're waiting for a Scarface album. And I know some of you guys who are younger, y'all don't really know, but Scarface was that dude. Like if you could watch the Kanye documentary, like he walk in the studio, everybody's like, oh, that's Scarface. That's Scarface. But like right now, a lot of artists who are, coming out of, I guess, their prime, who was big in the 90s and early 2000s, they're actually starting to release projects. And people are making some pretty decent money. Like, you got to think the greats are going to make money, regardless of how old or how young or independent or not. The greats are going to make money. Like Nas is making a ton of money off streaming. You know what I'm saying? Redman put out an album, did real good with streaming. There's a lot of talented artists that put out, albums right now that are making money from streaming. Is just not the big bag that people used to get before. Because before, everything just like boom. Like if you're a big artist and everything got paid off and you started making your money past that record one, that bag was coming. And I mean chunks of it. And even if you was an independent artist, that bag was coming very fast because you were selling CDs on the street. However, we got to look at it like this. Let's say, for instance, some of you guys who have CDs and you sold CDs back in the day. Say, for instance, you're an older guy and you had tapes of CDs. And you sold CDs, and right now you want to listen to some of your older stuff, but you don't have it. You may have misplaced the CD or whatever. You cannot listen to that song anymore. That song is over with. Unless you can find somebody who has that CD, you're not going to be able to listen to it. However, with streaming, you can go back, and if you uploaded the song, like right now, if I uploaded the song in 2014, I can look it up and bam, it's there. Unless it got removed from, by Spotify or whatever, because it was sitting there with no streams and nothing like that. But if I had some streams on there, pretty much all of my stuff right now, I can go online right now and I can listen to all the stuff that I've ever uploaded. Now, they do have options now with, with some of these aggregators to where, CD Baby and DistroKid and TuneCore, where you have to pay to, keep the song up on the streaming sites, but you can pay a one-time fee with a lot of these places. Some places don't even charge you. But right now, if you want to listen to a classic song from a classic artist right now, and you don't have their CD or tape or whatever, you can just go right here to a streaming service and stream it, and guess what?
Right
they
about
get
that.
a small piece of the pie from that. So it's actually very good for certain artists because, say for instance, there was an artist that was real big back in the day, and they had their stuff on records or tapes or whatever, and then finally they put it on the streaming platform, and people found out that these songs are now on the streaming platform. A lot of the people who are fans of that artist will actually go back to that platform and start re-streaming these songs. Because like I said before, when you own the physical copy, that's what you own. That's it. You got paid that time, and it's over with. It's done, unless it's like put in a movie or something like that, publishing wise, or if it's played on the radio, cool. That's it. Once they bought it, you got your chunk of money from that. That's it. However, with streaming, sometimes somebody might just want to be cleaning up the house and they might want to hear some Al Green. Okay, well now I can put it on pretty much any streaming site and listen to some Al Green, and now Al Green is starting to make some money. So that's the good thing I see about streaming, is that it can potentially help even artists who were kind of dormant to where now they can start making some money, because nobody's selling these tapes and CDs in the store, and then so many people have all these streaming platforms, or they'll use places like YouTube Music, which is completely free. They have all the albums, they just have ads running in it. But other than that, you can go back and listen to pretty much whatever you want, and then you will get a piece of that stream. And I'm just being honest with the money that I've seen from streaming.
Imagine bringing your side project to life just by thinking
I knew
about
there
it.
was another
Meet
one in
Base
that.
44.
It's not bad. Now, you have to have a big record. I ain't gonna lie to you. You're gonna have to have a big record. But even on my one independent little, parody record I did, I made some pretty decent money, and I didn't even have 1 million streams. I think I just now hit like 1 million streams, but I made some pretty decent money from that. So I think the main thing is what a lot of people have to understand is ownership with these situations. Ownership is the biggest thing, and during the streaming era, ownership of your master, of the master recording, is the big thing. Mm-hmm. Because if you have ownership of the master recording, you're going to get paid a hell of a lot more than if you sign with somebody and they own the master. So I think right now, with the streaming situation, you can make really good money, but you have to own the master side of that song. If you own that master side of that song, then that's where the money comes in. And that's why I was saying, like with Scarface, if he was to put out an independent album and he owned his masters, he would see a good amount of money. I'm almost for sure that people would go out and buy it. And with a lot of these artists, a lot of these people own their masters. And once you can collect that master side of it, then you start seeing, okay, streaming is okay. Because I think a lot of these guys are going off of what they went through when they were signed back in the day and how you get paid and, how it worked. Because a lot of times the record companies would, sign you to a deal. You get a deal, you get paid 15 to 25%. They would take care of everything. And you had this huge budget. And if, and then you could allocate this, money to be used to this, that, whatever. You could do it that way. Now the budgets are smaller because now people don't need to go into these big studios. People can get beats for a lot cheaper. You can get mixing and, sometimes you get just your engineer to do the mix and master for it or whatever. So a lot of times these budgets are not as big as they used to be, okay? But there are still producers right now. I know for a fact my homeboy just got a check for 30 grand for one beat. So people are still making money off of beats. They're not making a super producer money like they used to do. But, and now in some situations, they still are. Like, don't think like in other genres, they're not getting paid $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 for beats. But, that comes with pretty much songwriting and everything now. But now, you still get producers that are still getting paid $20,000 and $30,000. And that's what most of these producers were getting paid back then, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. Yep. So it hasn't really changed. But with the super duper producers like the Timberlands, the Dre's and stuff, yeah, they were making the money, which I don't know if people are going to make that much anymore, but people are still getting paid. You're still getting your front end, you're still getting your back end, you're still getting everything. It's just that for me, it's the same amount of money. It's just coming in a little bit slower. That's just for me personally. But I do definitely feel, how he feels like, streaming is just something that we really don't know because there's so many different variables. We don't really know how it's being collected or whatever, which I think that needs to be opened up more to the public so we would know what's going on with that. And I think that we also all need to educate ourselves as much as we can about this so that we can kind of spot things that just ain't right. Like if I feel something ain't right, I'll call somebody and be like, hey, I don't think this is right. Man, take a look into it. But I have the resources, but some people do not have those resources to do that. But I think that we all need to kind of be educated, with this whole streaming thing, if you want to do the independent thing or sign with labels so you'll know what's going on. And I think with the amount of information that's out, we can get a general idea of what's really kind of going on with it. But yeah, it's kind of crazy out here, with the streaming stuff. But a lot of people are still making money. They're still making money. And a lot of people